Did I do the right thing, kicking my cheating wife out, or am I the crazy one? Going to start this off by saying sorry for such a long rambling post. I've been on here a bit lately since my wife, F33, and I, M33, started fighting last month. We have known each other for about 13 years, dated for around 5 and have been married for 3. Over New Year's I went on a business/personal trip to see my mother, who I rarely see as I live across country from her. As it was business, I had very little time to call and talk to my wife, and had a few drinks as I was going to have to deal with my family. I came home from the weekend and she picks me up from the airport, listening to music that I love, but has never been fond of as far as I knew. Tripped a flag, but I let it go. We get home and the rest of the day is going great. She's upset that I drank and talked to her very little, but I don't think that it's anything too serious. Later that night I get up for a glass of water, and she's sitting on the couch, lean in for a kiss, and see a few messages arrive on her phone from Facebook. I don't read them as we have had issues in the past with my insecurities stemming from my roommate catching her in an internet relationship. She says nothing happened, I moved on as best as I could, salvaging as much of our relationship as I could, and then I caught her about 6 months after that with another person from our past texting and flirting. Then she flew cross country to spend a weekend with him, lying to me, telling me that she went to a college friend's house in a different part of the country. Again, I chose to let it go and salvage my relationship with her, and we moved on. So while I didn't read the message, I caught the name on the top, and at that point she noticed that she had messages and she furtively turned her phone upside down to hide it from me. I asked her who he was and why he was on a "hide the phone from me" status. She tells me it's a mutual acquaintance from our past, but that it's nothing. Another flag goes up, but I don't want to start this fight and let it go. Next day we are laying in bed trying to fall asleep. She has her iPad out playing games, and every few minutes she would angle the screen away from me and type a bit, then go back to her game normally. Something here is starting to ring bells, almost like she is hiding more from me than I thought before. So I wait until she goes to work the next morning, as she works weekends and I don't, and I open up her iPad to Facebook. I know this is creepy of me, but track history being what it is, I felt justified. I open her Facebook app, as she has never logged out of Facebook for the last 2 years as far as I know, only to be faced with username and password. Big flag flying now. Why would she log out of Facebook if she isn't hiding anything on Facebook? So I log her in. Not as creepy as it sounds, for the most part usernames and passwords are generally the same for all of our accounts for everything. Boom, I'm in. Let's see what her and this guy have been talking about. I open it and scroll back a few conversations and see him asking her to move across country to be with him, and her telling him that she cannot, for at least 6 months, as she has a commitment at work. A commitment at work is the only thing that is keeping her from leaving me according to this conversation. Nothing about me, or us, or the fact that 1 week prior we were talking about having kids together and starting the next chapter in our lives. I notice that she has had this conversation with this person, and I notice another conversation with another guy, but I didn't recognize the name so I didn't look through it. She comes home from work. I ask her if everything is okay with us. Are there any complaints or anything that she wants to talk to me about? She says no, that nothing is the matter and that everything is peachy. I ask her then why is she telling this other guy that she's unhappy and ready to move but can't because of work. She gets defensive and then flips it all back on my breaching her privacy. I understand that I did, and how that now she really is unhappy about some things. But that she doesn't have time to talk about it as she is leaving for an appointment. She leaves and I stew for about an hour, and open her iPad back up. Can't control myself at this point as we didn't actually talk or clear anything up, and I'm losing the last 5 years of my life all over again, for the 3rd time. I open up her Facebook and go to messages only to find that the first guy's messages are gone, as well as the second guy's. I'm concerned now about what was in that conversation if it wasn't innocent enough to not delete. She gets home and I try to sit her down and talk about all this again, and she makes the entire conversation about how I am being too controlling and violating her privacy, and that it sounds like I am accusing her out of guilt from my business trip, spent the entire time with my mother when I wasn't working, so, no, not guilt. Fast forward a few days and I have to leave for work, not a business trip but a trip to the ocean as I'm Navy. She is very distant until I leave and we don't really talk about much, and she won't even fight with me, telling me to go away and that she needs space. I go on my trip, and we used to talk daily via email, but I get a short "I'm running out the door, I'll email later" email, and then nothing for the rest of the week. I'm hurt at this point and really have no idea if I'm even going to have a wife at home when I get there. She is there when I get home to my surprise, but I notice that her phone and iPad now have the security lock on, and I check to be sure, and her laptop is also locked. And the sheets on our bed are in the wash, something she hasn't done in years. This is also the first night that she starts sleeping in her craft room on the couch. We get into a fight about her not talking to me the week I was gone and that she isn't talking to me now that I was back. I bring up how it really is making it hard to develop any trust back in her if she locks everything. She starts towing things like her job requires her to safeguard information and that she can't trust me to not look into her phone, that she has to have it locked. I can understand this, I guess, but it still bugs me. I watch her get text messages all day and she hides her phone when she responds/reads them so that I can't even see the phone. I know she's hiding it and say something to her. She of course gets mad and yells at me for trying to snoop. I get mad and tell her that I wouldn't have to if she was open. I tell her that if her conversation with people was so innocent that she could go a long way by just showing me. She refuses and throws the safeguarding information back at me. Again, I'm the bad guy for trying to look through her phone. I walk into her room that night to tell her good night as she has decided to not sleep in the bed with me, and as I walk in, she furtively shuts her laptop like I just walked in on her looking at something she wasn't supposed to be. Flags up everywhere. So moving on to this week, I've slowly gotten her to kinda start talking to me. We even have a civil lunch together, and we have a almost less than destructive conversation where she tells me that she doesn't know if she can ever trust me around her phone and stuff again, and that it is a deal breaker for her. Meanwhile, I'm trying to forget the jealousy and hurt that I feel, so that I can once again salvage my relationship with her. I promise her that I will never go through her phone and stuff again, as I just miss being around her and want to be with her. Then tonight. She comes home from work, 1 hour late. I've ordered food and it's getting cold. She has a likely excuse and I don't ride her about it. When she pulls into the driveway, I go to help her in, and as I walk up to the car, she's on her phone. I walk up to the door to open it and see the name on the top of the text message screen, and it's, you guessed it, the guy that started all this arguing in the first place. I lose it, and tell her that she has to show me. She doesn't have to worry about safeguarding information, as she can open up the text message and watch to make sure I don't go anywhere else. She tells me I just broke my promise to her to not go through her things, and I tell her it was accidental, and that I feel that the betrayal that I'm feeling feels worse than hers. And this is the point that she grabs her stuff for the night and leaves the house. I feel that she has done this to me over and over, and that I cannot continue to keep getting torn apart by her. But I still love her more than ever. However, I feel that I cannot move on without knowing the conversations that she is having, and having full disclosure. I doubt that she is coming back to me now, as she did this to her ex before me. I am curious as to what you fine people think of my situation, and if I was anywhere close to handling it right. I do love this woman, but that just makes it all the harder. I know there are many places in this where I was to blame. I just wish I had some hard evidence of her cheating on me to make it easy to leave. My wife has cheated on me in the past, and I think she is again, but don't know if it's just a problem with me. Any advice would be helpful. And I can elaborate on almost everything, as I feel I barely skimmed the surface of our whole relationship. Should I, 37/M, tell him, 28/M, about his cheating wife, 28/F? Over a year ago I was going through a bad breakup. I received a message from a woman at work. She cried a tall tale of an abusive/cheating husband, etc. To this day I have no idea if that's actually true, and tried to win me over. It didn't work at first. I was too caught up in the middle of my breakup. About 6 months later I had my own place, some newfound hope, and I was still talking to her. I thought of maybe trying things with her. She and I were sexually intimate and would meet once a week to either have sex or just hang out. She said she was slowly going through a breakup with him. This was all a lie. As the months went by she was running out of excuses, and I started to see the truth. She never intended on actually leaving him. Perhaps she entertained the idea at some point but never followed through. She needed help for a letter to the bank for a bank loan for a new house. And her boss at work, I wasn't her boss by the way, wasn't forthcoming. So I drafted up an official letter for her. It was the last time I would believe her. She moved and immediately cut me out of her life. Tried to cut ties but not directly. She tried to make me look like the villain. Like I had ruined things between her and I. I realize now she was trying to weasel her way out of the situation because she was afraid I would tell her husband the truth. Initially I wasn't going to tell him. Initially I had no intent of doing that because I had hoped she wasn't lying. Then when I realized she was lying I decided not to because it just wasn't in my character as they have 2 kids and I didn't want to be responsible for tearing up a family. But I no longer know what the right thing to do is. She called me at work a couple weeks ago and threatened to blackmail me and tell my work about the letter if I ever told her husband. Because I wasn't in the same department as her I'm not supposed to write those letters. I didn't even know that at the time of writing it. I'm 100% sure I could get away with that at work because I looked into it and although it isn't policy, it doesn't violate any rules, so it's very much an empty threat. I've since blocked her from contacting me in any way. There are pictures. Hundreds of dirty pictures, videos, screenshots of conversation. Well over 1,000 over the entire last year. I rarely sent her anything but she got a thrill out of sending me things so I never stopped her. I don't want her to get away with this. I feel like putting everything on a USB and giving it to her husband because if I was in his shoes, I would want to know what a lying scumbag of a woman I was married to. Is it wrong to desire retribution? I mean I know from an ethical standpoint it's wrong. But am I justified in wanting to do so? I'm really torn on what to do. A woman lied to me for a year about how she was breaking up with her husband, had an intimate, on-the-side relationship with me, ran out of excuses when I started to see through her lies and tried cutting me out of her life through blame and blackmail.